I was just watching the movie 47 Ronin. Um, a movie I had not seen before. It has a fairly unique style. Fantasy medieval. So, at times, raw, grounded, and uh, detailed with with human features enough that one might think it is a non-fiction depiction or a non-fantastical depiction. And then at some point, the movie just introduces some magical beast or some witch or some magic that really makes you really see. Oh yeah, it's it's not a non fantastic. It's quite a fan. There's quite a lot of fantasy in this movie, but it has quite a nice mix. Like I get into the realness of it, and then suddenly wow, magic comes along, and then the realness again. It has to do with Japanese culture and some kind of honor plot. Person decided to try to kill person from another province, and the guy on top sentences this person to death because they broke the rules. Typical power struggles in movies and politics, and coupled with the strictness of Japanese culture of honor. The traditionally known, the stereotypical one. And it made me think about structures of power and how it is that we submit to these structures as we follow our lives. As I see it, we in human society follow certain structures. There are structures that we have built over millennia that allow us to mingle among one another in relative non-conflict, because it increases understanding. Since developing language must have been quite an opener for possibilities. Because the difference between pointing things and making sounds and trying to communicate concepts with body language only to having precise symbols that can point to anywhere in our universe of meaning is enormous. It's the difference between just having a pile of meaning like it was rubble and us wanting to communicate meaning by bringing the other person to that mound of rubble and then trying to like insinuate with one's head which little piece of straw we're referring to. This one, and then okay, that one, and that one. Making an effort with each piece of meaning to basically a hash table. Vocabulary is a hash table of meaning. We can have a word and it points to a meaning directly, which hopefully is a similar meaning. The meaning that I pointed to with this word is very similar to the meaning that you point to with that word, and that is how we communicate, because we've been refining the commonalities in our communication up to the point where we have our current language, which I would say is more refined than it was before, I imagine. It has been refining. Anyway, so yeah, that's an example of how we've been increasing commonalities. It's part of the structure. It's a huge part of the structure. The fact that I know that most people in the world will recognize a greeting as standard. Symbols of hands, even something like this, meaning I greet and I mean no violence, is very useful, because it allows us to initiate contacts in a friendly manner, in a non-conflicted manner, saying, hello, I am here, I mean no harm, I would like to interact. And, well, interaction between members of a group allows the group more possibilities. It is coordination within the units of a group that has time and time again, over and over and over again, proven to outmatch, to outrival other groups with less able coordination. I've also been watching a lot of videos on YouTube about battles and how the soldiers come over from this river, but the other ones were on the other side of the hill, and they came on top of it and they didn't realize it, but then they had these other people hiding in a forest, and then they come out. And as I watched them, I realized skillful military tactics are a great example of group coordination. And what seems fairly simple from the vantage point of view, where all the soldiers are being looked at from above, the more as I imagine it, I realize that was not a simple problem to solve. It's not obvious, because one does not have a bird's eye view when on the field, and coordinating hundreds and thousands of people over here and over there, and wanting to give a signal at a certain moment, and having to make backup plans and understand each other at a distance when a decision in seconds is what matters and they are kilometers away, is very crucial. It's critical to to the skill, to the abilities that a group manages. And it's similar to how in our body we coordinate. There's this concept quoted often, hand-eye coordination. Hand-eye coordination. You see something and you can grab it, and you see something and you can grab it. Hand. I don't know if this is correct hand-eye coordination, but using the computer probably has a lot of hand-eye coordination. Hands to type, eyes to figure out what's going, and making sure that what I'm typing corresponds to what I'm reading, writing in a similar fashion. I mean, express and perceiving. I guess that's what hand-eye coordination is. Hand expresses, eye perceives, ensuring that they are in sync with the intent that we have. And so it is with armies. They have these different pieces, and military leaders are trying to figure out, okay, you are the reserve, and you are the eyes over here, and you are the quick strike force made out of horses, which might be something like analogous to like a slapper from a body, bah! That can come in at a surprise, in a surprising manner. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, coordination in the group is it helps us grow. I mean, in these bodies, we have these, they say, billions of cells that somehow are coordinating all the time. All the time. They're coordinating in their own system that they have developed over... don't lock the screen. And they have developed over billions of years. And they're all there. They're all like building and trying to find the foreign bacteria and eating them, and other other cells are just like flowing in whatever, giving oxygen and dying, and some others are just transmitting electricity, and some are just digesting, and some are just like making pressure for the pee to go out, or for the blood to go through, or for the and for skin to continually grow. They're all like working continuously through their life in a marvelously coordinated way that allows us to do things like, right, hand-eye coordination. Cells over here, and cells in brain, and cells in the arm, and cells all throughout this have to be coordinated all the time, and we do it in an instantaneous, almost instantaneous fashion. It's amazing. Our internal coordination is amazing. Lovely, lovely body machines that we have. And then I see these structures of power in society. And I was wondering, why do we submit to these structures? Because the example I was looking at was that in the movie there is one of the clan leaders gets falsely accused of trying to kill another clan leader, and so the first clan leader, which is the good guy, but he was bewitched, then he is told, hey, your sentence is death. The law is clear, you gotta die. Now, if you kill yourself, at least your honor will be, the honor of your village will be protected. And she's like, yep, gotta protect the honor of my village. Gonna kill myself. And the movie shows that everyone around them is crying and saying, no, this is not possible, you didn't do anything, you were bewitched. And it doesn't matter. They all accept what this structure is imposing upon them. The power over them, the shogun tells the guy, you need to die. That's the law. And even the shogun, I can tell it's almost not his decision. He's just following what the law says because it's clear. So the top guy, he's submitting to the structure that has been set at some point, which is called the law. And everyone submits to it, and everyone knows that that is the way to go. And my thoughts are on what makes us submit to these structures. Why is that something preferable, something good? And I realized that, well, structures are structures. They are real, as somewhat impalpable as they might be. Like, oh, the laws. Where are the laws? Oh, they are books, but books are books. They are not forcing me to do anything. These societal rules are intangible. They're not of the physical world. We pipe them into the physical world through our understanding of the laws and of the rules. And why do we follow the laws and rules? Because we have submitted to these structures of power. And why have we submitted to these structures of power? Because they provide certainties. Because they provide stabilities, predictability. And although in this modern society it might not seem such a novelty, I posit that for millions of years, and even while our species has been alive, hundreds of thousands of years, things have been much less certain, much less reliable, much less stable than the experience we're having right now. Because being an animal in nature just by oneself is quite a risky endeavor by itself. One has no guarantee that a predator is not around to eat me, or the parasite is not prowling around close enough to invade my body and kill me soon, or that food supplies just happen to migrate away or not grow well enough because of the weather, and the weather just blows everything away, and then suddenly, I cannot continue my life flow because I don't have enough input or enough resources to do so. Or there's nothing that guarantees that the nearby river will not flood the shelter that I have made away. And then I'm shelterless, which increases my likelihood of dying, or at least of not having where to sleep, or not having the stuff that I have, and the stuff that I have is useful for me to do things. So stability and reliability have been not a guarantee at all for millennia and millennia. And then at some point, I believe people started figuring out, hey, we can build some kind of reliability. We can build some kind of reliability. We can build some kind of structures. And then they realized, but we gotta cooperate. We gotta coordinate between each other. I'm sure that many of the stability and reliability problems were based on even in conflicts between us, people of our own species. Because there's rivalry and there's competition for resources and blah 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 blah. We want because overlapping desires will tend to try to grab to be on top of each other. Any structure provides stability in exchange for ampleness of possibilities. Amplitude in return for amplitude of possibilities in exchange. Again, unlock screen. Because that's the nature of structure. Structure is, in a simple fashion, a representation of structure is a wall. A wall is simply a part of a structure that says things. There will be no passage of things from this side to that side. It's a geometric boundary, block, saying prevent the movement of things from here to there. And that can be done for a military purpose, as in, okay, you people that want to harm us stay on that side of the wall, we stay on this side of the wall, so bound. So that's protection. Then there is simply then there are the more domestic issues, like make that wall so that inside of here it stays warm and outside it stays cold. It's a structure. And it's useful because it shapes things as we like it. We like guys who would like to harm us to be away from us. We want the temperature in where we are to be comfortable to us, whether the temperature of the environment, if the weather is comfortable or not for us. We would like to regulate how much wind we have, how much humidity we have, how much temperature we have. We'd like to regulate how much food we have and that it stays long, and that's why we get refrigerators, and refrigerators need structure because they need a lot of design, and that's been done in the last century and a half or so, and yeah, we make all these structures. Structure. So a wall is a physical representation of structure. Laws are a social representation of a structure. laws and rules and hierarchies. Because I'm pretty sure that people have figured out that in the event of when we want to advance as a collective, as a group, it helps to not have a million different opinions trying to congeal into a single intent to move forward, to move in one direction, and not be like uncoordinated molecules that are just randomly zipping about that go in no particular direction. In the example of molecules, if we were molecules that are uncorrelated with each other, then we just diffuse. Second law of thermodynamics, like. However, we build walls. That's and that's the laws we make. We build walls over here and we build walls over there, and we build them in such a way that it allows our intents to flow. And more importantly, the social walls are made so that we can coordinate our efforts and build a larger self, a larger flow, a wider flow with a wider scope. The image that comes to me often is that of the thousands of garbage collectors that go into the cities and their job is to collect the garbage. And I would say it's not typically seen as a pretty role, as an attractive role, though it can be a critical role. It's often a critical role. It's the waste disposal system of our society. We are producing waste. I, as a unit of society, am producing waste as I eat, as I consume, with plastic packaging and food leftovers and broken cutlery and unused furniture and unused broken cables and electronics, and I'm just moving them out. And I prefer convenience. I prefer to not need to go through the whole cycle of waste disposal myself, my body, to go physically through the whole thing, because it takes energy, it takes time. And that energy and that time is, well, I guess in a society we've figured out that it is effective to pour one's time and energy in a focused role, in focused roles. Like, there are people who are plumbers because they have learned how to plumb. And there are people who are electricians because they have learned how to do electricity. And there are people who write software because they have learned how to do software. And there are people who are carrying heavy things because they're okay with carrying heavy things. There are people who are serving the customer and offering commerce, offering transactions, and facilitating transactions. And maybe they like that. Maybe they like doing that. Maybe they do not. However, the role that is created, that employment, that position, it's a pipe. It's a pipe through which energy can flow in a specific direction, because that specific direction is useful to the flow of the whole entity, which in this case I'm imagining to be a supermarket. There's a supermarket, there's a whole flow of things happening in a supermarket. There's a lot of flow of people coming in and putting stuff in the store. There's a lot of flow of people who are just facilitating the exchange of transactions. There's a lot of flow of people who are disposing of the waste of the food from the stores. There's people who are going in and giving money in exchange for the foods and for the things. And there are people who are figuring out whether the things that are being sold are are good to sell. Are they valuable enough to the people, to the consumers? Are they valuable enough? Are the consumers willing to pay the prices requested? If not, why not? Analysis needs to be done. There are people who are looking at how things are built. Make sure that the building is not leaking. That the building has enough power and refrigeration units and cashier software, updated cashier software, making sure that it works. And when it does not work, going in and repair it because it's a time-critical issue. There's a multitude of roles for any collective entity. And it makes sense that as we've grown, as we've found deeper and deeper and deeper precision into each specific role, whether that be the way the groceries are organized, or the way the building is built, or the way that the customers are being served, like with self-checkout boxes, that development of those self-checkout boxes. It makes sense that people would dedicate themselves to only a few of the things, because they're very recent developments. We humans in our current society, we don't absorb the knowledge of all of them at the same time. I have no idea how to fix leaks in building or refrigeration units, or I don't know if I would be a very friendly, good, or effective cashier, or security guard, or organizer in a grocery store. I have no idea. I've only been there in the role of a consumer, and I know I can fit that one. I accept that I can be a consumer. However, as I accept my role as a consumer in a supermarket, and as I depend on it, I'm also accepting my disconnection from the production of the things I use, of the food I eat, of the drinks I drink, stuff I find in the grocery stores, of the toothbrushes that I use, of the toothpaste that I use. By accepting my dependency on grocery stores, I'm accepting as well. The more I accept my dependency on them, the more I accept my inability to produce those for myself. And although it hasn't been an explicit choice for me, that one, I'm fine with it. I'm completely fine with not needing to produce my own food. If someone told me, oh, you gotta start producing your food next week, or next month, or next year, or something, I'd be like, oh man, really? It's convenient to go to the grocery store. They have all these things. And I want to do other things. I don't want to go and learn how to make gardens. Like maybe some people do. Some people don't. You're just attracted to different things. And I would say that many of the services that that are almost invisible now in our society, and from my perspective, Western style cities, healthy cities. Um, from my perspective, in these healthy cities, it seems to me that many people would have very similar attitudes towards all of these services. If at some point someone would say, you know what, there's going to be no more garbage people in the city. Everyone's got to go and throw their trash in the main recycling center or the main garbage hole in the city. Everyone's gonna go there. Everyone would be like, oh man, what? I don't want to go there. I mean, some people even have problems just putting the garbage bag by their house on Tuesday mornings before 7 a.m. They're like, oh man, I forgot to do that. If they were told that they have to go to another part of the city or outside the city to deposit it, I imagine they would not like it. Because we people, as just as gases, we tend to like fill up our space being in this case time. So if we have a day, we tend to fill it up with activities or with work, with productivity, with self-entertainment. We fill it up. And yeah, the more we tell people like, okay, you have to do this, like, oh, the trash, you gotta go get the trash yourself, you gotta go grow your own food, sorry, we're not gonna provide any more vegetables, now you gotta make your own vegetables. That'd be quite a crisis. I mean, I'm certain that almost immediately would arise groups of people or people who are interested in growing these foods or moving this trash. These groups would just immediately arise and say, hey, I like to do it, you don't like to do it, how about I just do it for you? I'll do it for the groups of you 10 people and you give me something and I'll go throw the trash for you. It's like everyone would be like, alright, that seems good. I feel those are healthy flows in our society that work when it works. Convenience, security, and reliability. Like sometimes I feel it's taken quite a bit for granted. At least I do. There is no violence around me. There's no violence around many of us people. There is still violence around some people, some lands of different kinds, some more subtle, some more overt. But overall, as a species, we have such calm, such intra-species calm, such calm, relative. Or would I say just unexpressed tensions? Well, there's very little explicit violence relative to 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, the survival of my town in the middle of wars in between the countries was a dice roll away from being destroyed, from being pillaged, from having all my stuff taken away. It was just this thing where we didn't keep track of things, and now 1,000 years later we have tax systems that try to figure out exactly how much value I'm getting in and how I'm getting out and what's fair and what's not fair, and being able to ask for value to the cent. I posit because as a society we've found that precision of measurement aids in reliability. It's quite different to say, how long is it? It's 3 meters. It's around 3 meters. and to saying how long is it? It's 3.275 to 3 meters. Exactly. It refines the perspective that we have on something. Similar to the specialization of roles we have developed. Each of our specialization is a refinement of the whole amplitude of possibilities that we as humans are able to do in these bodies and with these minds and with these emotions. In societal roles, we accept a much narrower path, a much narrower specialization. I posit because it takes time, it takes effort to develop that refinement, to develop that level of a level of effectiveness with such precision. Now we have education careers that takes regularly 4 or 5 years. I mean university degrees, 4 or 5 years that kind of narrow the field that we go in. It takes 4 or 5 years to simply get the basic theory right, so that when we go out into the world, we at least can speak the same language. We have similar basic skills as the people who are already doing it. It takes a lot of training, it takes a lot of specialization for specialized roles. Yes, there are a lot of roles that are not specialized, and that's fine. In a sense, I would say that some people are more generalists, like they don't specifically know one thing precisely, but they may know about a lot of different things in probably precise ways, but probably just in good enough ways to get things done. They're very effective at many different things. Convenience, stability. Yes, these societal structures we have created allow us stability, allow us reliability, allow us to say, I can live in my house and I will not be disturbed, and I can have peace. And if I just stay here for a year, it was most likely that I will not be harmed. And that is something that we, as humans, human animals that want to survive, like. We like to not be harmed. We like to keep surviving. So why did this clan leader decide to kill himself? Because it retained the stability of the rest of his village. It is sensible that the continuation of a single village is worth the death of one person. The continuation of their stability, of their peace, of their development. If we have a flower, a plant, if we have a plant, if we grow on a plant, we would like to see it bloom. We would like to see it develop into all it can be. More so when if we have a planting, it's because we have an attachment. I was going to say more so if we have an attachment, but if we have a plant, there is an attachment there. And if the village is the plant, then we would like the village to continue developing if there's a relationship with it, an affinity. It feels to me that these specialized roles, that these flows that we make through in society, the flow of resources in society, the flow of order in society, the laws that we make, the laws that we make, to me they seem like straight diverters of flow. So the flow can only go here, can only go there. Also laws are walls in behavior, simply. And they guide the direction that our collective river is taking. It says, you can only go here, you can only here. No, sorry, can't go there. That there is murdering people, and we don't want people murdering, so you go that way. And people are like, okay, okay. And it doesn't mean that everyone goes there. There will be drops that that accidentally or intentionally jump over the wall. And some are caught and some are not, because catching people is also something, a flow. It's a police force that also has its own flow, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Everything is basically at its core unreliable, because the world is a flow. All of our flows, they feel like the flows that we have inside our own bodies. We have, I don't know how many thousands of paths, rivers, blood vessels. We have a 3D moving river of blood inside of us, moving all the time, flowing, pumping in this moving vehicle that we are moving around all the time, and it's flexible enough to compress and expand and compress, and tons of paths all around. Each of the fibers in our muscles is a path, and they all do their role when we are lifting something or moving something, and with our muscles, they're all pulling. It's a collective effort. And our flows in society, I see them similar to that. Each role, each path, each role, a fiber, a piece of the flow that allows things to flow through us. Electrical signals through our body, hormonal signals to move us. Hormonal signals, like emotional manifestations of emotional signals. Electrical signals, blood for oxygen, security guards, the white blood cells that are flowing all around us, another flow. It's all just flows, and we in society have all these flows. We are it's just another level of the fractal. And as I see it, as the paths become narrower, as our refinement refines, as it increases in precision, it also allows for a higher pressure. Even from the geometric perspective. Pressure is force divided by area. So as area diminishes, where it was a pipe like this, and then it was like refined to something that's very, very specific, one can flow through it with greater speed, with greater specificity. That is the specialization. We're just focusing our efforts on specific path and a specific pipe that is ever narrower. That becomes narrower, and as it becomes narrower, it allows for further research, for further development in that particular role. And in our history as in human society, these refinements have proven effective to provide us with convenience, with instant communication. Our technology has advanced enough to be able to spread messages instantaneously. Very fast. To spread them very, very, very fast across the world in a matter of seconds. And that's pretty useful. I do see, though, that anyway, I want to go back to first to the question of the why did the clan leader kill himself? To retain the stability and reliability and calm that the people he was attached to, the people he felt a duty towards, to continue, to save it. Because when we accept the structures of society, we are also accepting our own dependency on them. We're accepting our lack of ability to take care of ourselves completely, of being fully self-reliant. Yes, as a matter of practice, of course. It doesn't mean if I go to the grocery store, then I am fully dependent. No, I can completely see a hardcore survivalist going to the grocery store because it's there. But yes, the more we accept the conveniences that society gives us, the more dependent we become on it. And the more we don't want to lose it. And an attribute that our structures of power have are that they often have few leaders that lead, that guide the power. And I would say in medieval the situations like the movie I was watching. I will get back to it at some point. 47 Ronin. I would say in those times the structure, the power was embodied in the leaders. The leader was the anchor of the structure. And when this leader was saw wavering, when this leader was seen to be to perhaps fall ill or to not be the best he could, I think it is possible one can start seeing cracks in society because one realizes, oh, there's a weakness there. If the top person is weak, then it naturally diminishes the trust in the collective. Whereas if the top is fully themselves, they present strength and they present effectiveness, then the collective is also given respect. And the collective trusts in itself because they see that the leader is projecting coherent power. And in those times, I would say, the leader embodied that power. So when that leader, for some reason, went away, died, or illness, or anything, problems arose. And then we see this history, we have all these times in history when there was a power struggle, when there's a power vacuum, people try to get to the power, to be on top of power. But if there's conflict, get into the power vacuum, then a lot of forces are trying to beat each other, and the overlapping desires are fighting against each other again. And yeah, conflict happens, and then there's not so much stability and reliability, and that's why I've seen that, okay, the reason why the famous French Revolution and the US Revolution were considered so revolutionary, I feel, is that they abstracted out the embodiment of power. And the embodiment of power was no longer embodied in the person, in the monarch, in in a human being in a physical body. It, through cycles and cycles of bloodshed and figuring out things, they managed to abstract that power out into a government, and say, okay, it's not a person that is the embodiment of power, it's the government that has the embodiment of power. And then a single person is not a single point of failure. Before there was a king, and he was awesome, and oh yeah, and everything was fine, and he's humane, and he's good, and great. And then as a human body, he dies. And then the reliability of the next people to rule, to continue having the role of leading a collective, is no longer reliable. You don't know if the other people are going to be like him. They're irreplaceable. Even if a son comes along, everyone's like, well, I'm not sure if he has the same intentions as the other one, or is he weaker than the other one? Do I trust this person? It was very based on the person. And then in these revolutions, the power got extracted from the human being into laws. Laws. Laws, not LOSS. laws. And that is, and it does seem like a revolutionary achievement. And even in this movie of Ronin, 47 Ronin, they had a law. Even the top guy says, the law says this must happen. They were already laws that people submitted to. They're like, okay, yes, this is what is going to be followed. But the point when the power is actually extracted from the human and encoded into laws, it requires a lot of advancements. It requires first for the populace to be able to understand what that means. Because as animals, human animals that we are, it is simple to understand the power. He has the power. Oh, he's the guy. Okay, he's the alpha. Okay, I follow him. What he says, that's the thing to do. Kind of like a pack animal sort of thing. But then understanding that there's no one particular person leading, we are trusting in the system that we have developed together to lead us. It's not a specific person. It's not a specific person. It's more of a structure and somewhat of an ideology that will take us forward. Having a person say, I don't know where I was going with that sentence. It abstracted the power away from the human beings. And human beings still come in the embodied role that they are given. But it's a temporary role. It's known that the power itself does not lie in the person. It lies in the structure that is given. So yes, I can see that it requires the populace to understand at least enough sufficient portion of the population to understand that abstraction, which probably required things like the printing press, so that everyone can learn what's going on. If you don't have to write them by hand, then more people can actually learn how to interpret all these things that are happening, all these things that people are saying. You must do this. You must not do that. Oh, okay, I can just read it. No one, the sign will tell it to me. Will tell it 1,000,000 times to 1,000,000 people who come by. And there's not a single person who needs to say it 1,000,000 times, which is more tiring and more time-consuming, energy-consuming. But it's just encoded, physical representation of a law. Understanding that required for such an abstraction. And then it also requires that this structure be designed in a stable fashion. Because when developing a system of laws, when developing a government, one's developing a set of rules, a set of fairly straight rules, like I was saying laws are, fairly straight, that will allow the ever-changing flow of society to always flow to always, or at least try to always flow smoothly, reliably. And however much we take laws for granted these days, that does not seem like an easy task. Because laws they're attempting to encode whatever the one person with the power was given before, whatever that person's internal processes were that needed to consider the different kinds of populations, the farmers and smiths and the fighters and royalty and the spies and the cavalry, and there's just knowledge that he knows about it, that all needs to go and get encoded somewhere. Because for such an abstraction to work, all the information must be encoded there. It's not just, oh, this person knows about it, knows enough about it. No. That information needs to go up there. Somehow. Look. Because only in that manner can we add more structure to our collective reliably. That's how we have allowed ourselves to grow so much, to have so many human beings on this planet. Because we all have reached enough commonalities. Language, usage of computers, usage of money. I would say even just the two, language and money, that is huge. The fact that I can understand those two concepts with anyone in the world means that pretty much all human beings are able and perhaps willing to communicate through voice, and through voice means also probably not violently with the physical body, and that they're willing to exchange values. They have that concept in that there's values are exchangeable, and values are flowable, are movable, and that requires some kind of trust. That is a great foundation for human beings to have. And we have it. I really want to pee. So we have this foundation of language and money, and of many other things that we have developed. We most recently have found the commonality of being able to handle very similar operating systems. We have computers. We pretty much all understand the layout of the QWERTY keyboard. That's huge. People give me a machine that holds millions and billions of bits of information, and we have standardized the way that people interact with them, and that allows us to go pick up most any of the mainstream computers in the world and continue to communicate. Like, we have giving ourselves tools that are so very powerful in comparison to the communication tools we had decades ago. Powerful and fast and rich. Video sharing right here. And all I do is talk and share, and anyone can hear my message. It's pretty cool. So this is what collective society allows. Structure allows, reliability allows. Structure, I mean, we could not have had internet as we have it now without people pouring their time and effort to develop these minutious standards of the composition, the exact minimum requirement of the purity of the copper in the composition of Cat5e cables and Cat6 cables for RJ45 networks, and the exact plastic coating around it, and what material it could be, and what makes it waterproof, and how thick can it be, and how thick can it not be. All the little standards. They are such narrow roles, and yet by this narrowness, by this precision allows standardization, and standardization allows an effective spread of them, because it's so convenient. If everyone had computers that all had different interfaces and you need to learn how to use them in different ways, they would not have at all picked up with the speed that they have these days. They have part of their explosive rise has been due to the effective standardization we've had, which is also only available through precision. How willing would people be to use keyboards that are not my own if the keys are in a different position, or they are just slightly skewed a little bit over here, a little bit over there, or they don't feel the same, or even the two little lines on the F and the J's, and the F and the J keys. We use them. They're useful. And it requires precision that 100 years ago, more like 200 years. 200 years ago would have been considered absurd by many. Not now. Now we see that there's value in it. Anyway, we've made these flows and flows, narrow flows, instead of a few wide flows of roles being like peasants and smiths and food makers and horse keepers, water bringers, all the more the rawer roles. We have developed very fine roles. And for these fine roles to survive, they require a stable infrastructure, a stable platform on which to rely. Because as humans, we require sustenance, we require nourishment, we require food. And acquiring food, making sure that we have food, that we have shelter, that we have water, that we have power, that we have enough heating, was a full-time job centuries ago, millennia ago, and centuries ago. Now it's not. Now we can choose to
live atop this stable infrastructure. And defer all of the raw, denser roles and refine and narrow into the abstract. Not necessarily into the abstract, into the refined. We can, and there will be a lot of people that are taking care of this stable infrastructure, and there will be a lot of people who are attempting to refine. And infrastructure is being refined as well. It's all together. What I was getting at too before was that laws developing laws that allowed such a stable infrastructure to be created, it does not seem simple. Like I said, it needs to encode the information that we as a society hold. Knowledge such as perhaps that people who produce food, the farmers, they are subject to problems with weather, then it's important to consider that in times of inclement weather, their ability to survive, their ability to continue existing and living well and healthily should not depend on inclement weather, because inclement weather brings instability, and we want the infrastructure to be stable. So there are all these rules about farmers being able to be remunerated if they are going, if the weather is not going well, or if their crops did not go well enough. I'm speaking about countries. I'm speaking about US and Europe mostly, which are the ones I know of. Because I imagine I've seen a lot in tax codes that they have all these clauses. My point is encoding all that information and not depending on a single human being to have it and just like, okay, this person needs to know everything so that he can lead as well. But encoding it into laws, into so far what we figured out is static laws, and just adding on more laws and dependencies and relationships in the law code. It's not an easy task. It doesn't seem easy. What before was encoded in a single person's learning now needs to be encoded in an abstraction. And I feel that as a society we've been struggling to find good ways of doing it. And we found a few good ways. There's a lot of laws, there's constitutions, there are tax codes, very specific tax codes, there are specific law codes, and they work, and there are all these regulations of cities, and things work, mostly. And when they don't work, they get changed. And this flexibility needed to be entered into the code when it was being created, because it needed to realize, well, it's going to change, because we as a society change, so we need to find ways to change. And so we have all these law protocols that have been around for hundreds of years, and that are still growing, and we still need to do something with that clutter, because it's just cluttering up. When I see it that way, I realized that it makes sense that it makes sense how sometimes I read that certain people were interested in law, and in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, 1700s and 1800s, I would say, There are people who are distinguished by with tasks of such as mathematics or physics or astronomy, and they're also interested in law. Like sometimes they were saying, yeah, this person was a mathematician and an artist and a painter and an architect and a log and a lawyer. To me, right now, in this moment of 2021, law seems so separate from all the other ones. You can even tell by my face that I'm like I hold some disgust for law because it feels cluttered. It feels restrictive. It feels it feels so cluttered. However, I can see how it would attract the interest of people who are attracted to the concepts of abstraction, like mathematics and physics. Natural sciences. Because at that point they're it's a task of encoding. It's a task of encoding. It's a task of encoding what we as a society want from each other in a ginormous state diagram, where paths are possible from this point to this point, to that point to that point, from innocent to guilty, from guilty to innocent, from free to arrested, from having money to not having money, from not having money to having money, from employment to non-employment, from contracts with possessions, with how goods are produced, with how goods are transported. I lost my train of thought. All those things need to be encoded. And I can see how it would appeal to people who can abstract things out, because it requires thinking abstractly. What happens if this, then that, if this, then that? How to create deterministic rules that move from one place to another. And determinism is good in laws, usually, because it provides a certain guarantee to the population, to the populace, to each of us units, that there is fairness in the system. And fairness is something that we humans seem to be wired to want. Like, okay, we don't want to be treated worse than the other person. We want to be treated at least as well as the other person. And so we're trying to all look for fairness. So he has more. No, I should have a little more. No. And then there are laws that still allow for the power laws of wealth and power and education to exist, because they do exist, and still maintain the structure, the stability of the structure. Because if enough people are discontented, the structure can collapse into disarray. So yeah, I can see how people who with abstract affinities to abstraction would like to create laws. They're thinking, okay, what happens if this? What happens if that? What happens if that? How to solve the problem? What is that? What is that? What can be the deciding factor between choosing that a person is like person killed some other person? What is the deciding factor between them being given a big punishment and a small punishment? Oh, intent. Okay, intent. What does intent mean? Like they need to dig deeper into meaning, and until they come to something that is that feels good, that feels fair to the community as a whole. So I can see the appeal. I can see the appeal when laws were when we were coding out things in society and putting them up in the system that we were beginning to trust in. It required the work of people who are interested in abstracting things out. Yeah, so it makes sense that people who would like mathematics will also like laws. These days, laws are full of stuff. They're really full of stuff. And I can see why people who are interested in abstraction, but who are also interested in elegance and simplicity, would not want to be related to law, because laws have become a mess. It seems to me that laws could get a revamp on their encoding. There's a lot of encoding that lately that's from our society that has not been brought up to a formal encoding. And I just see that because, well, legislation seems slow. Probably by design. But hey, technology is moving faster than than legislation, and that is creating tension in some places. Laws are like trying to hold technology back and say, whoa, 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 what are you doing? Technology's like, no, dude, what are you doing? We can do so many things. Let us go, let us go. And then we have data privacy issues and data, what is it, GDPR? General Data Protection Regulations, and Freedom of Information Acts and privacy, and figuring out who can know who can know what from whom. Because we, as internet users, we are also submitting our information out into the information realm, the abstract information realm. And just like with grocery stores, the more we use them, the more we depend on them, the more we are accepting our inability to not need it. And so the internet is becoming part of this solid infrastructure, whereas before it might have been this abstract toy / luxury / weirdness people didn't know very much about. Its usefulness has become standardized enough and widespread enough that it can be another layer in our infrastructure to continue to grow. And I like that. It allows me to work from this room. I sit here, I look at my computer, and I type, and I communicate, and I code more things. I work in software engineering, and so I get more messages that want encoding, and I encode them into the computer, and they get transmitted through cable and through electrical signals out into the world, out into somewhere I don't even know where it is. The flow was already designed and structured by someone else, and I just encode. That is my role. My role is to encode, and per an employment agreement, as I do that, I also get a remuneration, and that remuneration allows me to buy things and to buy the right to use this property as my shelter. And so I can totally see why if there were like a king of this society, the king of Switzerland, if the king of Switzerland were to be given a choice between not dying and having his society destabilize, or to die and having his society continue to be stable, I can see why he might likely choose to have the society continue to be stability. Many of us have come to assume it's a status quo. And it has become the status quo. It's just important to know that the mechanism by which we are achieving the status quo. Because when we forget, it can happen that we begin to assume that all these flows, all these conveniences that we have are a must, are a given. When we do not understand how all of the structure is composed of all our individual roles, it becomes easier to get in the way of the flows. Kind of to realize like, oh, that flow is not there, and kind of step in the way and interrupt the flow. Just like assuming things. Like I think sometimes about social security benefits, and I hear that some people in some communities, some countries, they have come to depend completely on social security benefits. They live assuming that they will have security benefits, and not having security benefits would be hazardous to their existence, to their lifestyle at least, because they have always depended on social assistance. And then when social assistance is being taken away, because of whatever reason is happening in that country at that time, there's a crisis, drought, something, revolts happen. Simply because there was a disconnection between themselves and the understanding of how the structure works. I am wondering whether I'm recording audio for this video. I do hope I am. Blah, 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 blah. Structure, narrow, digital laws. Yes. I feel that information, are encoding information into government, into politics, into policies, could use a revamp. I feel it's been outdated. Its mechanism seems outdated for quite a long time. There are conflicts. There are struggles. As we ourselves are, as even our individual identities, we are accepting their abstraction in society. As I see it in the internet, we are communicating, we are embodying our energy through signals, through digital signals, no longer through our physical presence, but just through information. And whereas before human bodies were fairly irreplaceable and unsubstitutable, irreplaceable with each other, information is not. Information is very copyable. And so we have this wave of phishing and spam bots and efforts to extract energy from the parts of the system that are still leaking because the structure is not yet complete, like the problem of authentication. The system verifying that the user using the system is who he or she says he or she is. And of course, we've had passwords to try to do that, and we tried to do two-factor authentication with mobile phones, and we tried to use security keys, and we tried to have security questions, and there are phone calls, and sometimes there's fingerprint usage, and there's face recognition, and I can see how society's trying to solve that problem. Authentication, because that feature we've assumed about physical bodies, their irreplaceability, it's not yet a guarantee in the internet world, in the online world. Again. And as best as we have been able to figure out, irreplaceability is a necessary part of our system to work, because we still have possessions. If I have possessions stored in money in a certain place, in a central part, that's a critical point, that's a single point of failure, because if someone else is able to take the possessions that I have deposited there, claiming to be me, then my possessions are not guaranteed to be stable. And then I lose trust in the system. And then the system crumbles away. And that's why people have been talking about, no, quantum computers don't solve our SSA encryption, because then we cannot guarantee authentication anymore. I see their point. I totally see their point. It would crumble away the internet infrastructure that we have built. Some of it anyway. The part that requires authentication, the part where we trust systems with authentication, it would crumble if it became widespread and stuff. Encoding. I feel our laws could use a revamp of more structured information encoding. Right now it feels outdated. It feels like they're still doing it in a way that they did in the 1700s. With just hazy meanings. Words, as sometimes marvelous they seem, they still are imprecise depending on the language. Some languages more precise than others. And yeah, I would like to delve. I would like to explore a further, more refined structuring of the information we encode into laws. Many of them perhaps make them autonomous and make them not require the manual intervention of judges and police officers and clerks. And that, of course, brings the struggle of, well, are we going to be sure that the system is fair? Well, development. As we grow, our clothes get tight, and then the clothes need to rip a little bit, and then we need to design new clothes, and at the beginning they're going to be loose, and they're not going to fit everywhere, and we're going to have to fix them, and then we continue to grow in other places, and then it will rip again, and then we need to do it again. We grow. Like the lobster shedding its shell every few years. Mm-hmm. The way that the lobster knows that it's time to change its shell is that it feels uncomfortable. That's said by a rabbi somewhere on YouTube. I like that video. So, movie of 47 Ronin with Keanu Reeves. I haven't finished it yet. A shogun who says that someone must die for his honor. And he didn't like it, but the law told him, and so he told the other guy, and he said, yeah, for the honor of my village. And the honor, in some way, actually represents the stability of a village. And that is, I can see how that is valuable. My belly feels good. Still with hot tea from a while ago. And people defer to dishonor. They do to dishonor. They defer to the structures of society because it provides the stability that we have depended on, that we have come to consider the status quo, and without which many of us are unable to rely on ourselves to survive. I wonder if I'd like to read Self-Reliance by Emerson. I never have, but maybe it has some things to say about this. Anyway, Self-Reliance, I can see why they would be interested in keeping the structure that they have developed. Walls are examples of physical structures. Laws are examples of abstract structures, mental structures, state flows, diagrams. State diagrams is much of what I feel is mental structures. State diagrams, charts, systems engineering. I posit even that systems engineering is a cousin of lawmaking. Information encoding. And also I posit that that as we specialize in our roles, as we narrow our fields of interest, we can also shoot further and develop further and refine further into it, because we can pour all of our energy into more precise, more smaller, more minutious points of interest. And that advances our collective library, our collective library of knowledge, of achievements, of progress. And laws, and I can see how someone who would be interested in mathematics or physics or astronomy would also be interested in laws several centuries ago. And yeah, laws are sort of like movers, filters, walls to try to accommodate the stability of the flow that is our society. Yes.